The inverted coast. In the new land, Ren and Kaylin lived within the architecture of the straight line. Every street was a grid, every building a box, and every conversation a clinical exchange. They practiced white speak, a language of literal facts and sharp edges, stripping the world of its mystery to ensure their survival. They moved through the city like ghosts in a machine, careful not to trip over the unspoken. Ren navigated his days with a white mind. He categorized the clouds by their density and the trees by their height. To him, a forest was merely a collection of timber, and a river was a calculated volume of moving water. This rigid order was a shield. If he could name everything with scientific precision, nothing could ever surprise him, and nothing could ever hurt him. While they lived in the sterile quiet of the new land, their hearts were anchored elsewhere. Across the vast Pacific, 80 cousins lived in a tumble of noise, shared meals, and ancient stories. Kaylin often stood by the shore, staring at the horizon where the blue of the sea met the blue of the sky, feeling the weight of the distance like a physical ache in her chest. Ren began to cross the ocean frequently, traveling between the grid and the garden. In the middle of the Pacific, where the water is deep enough to swallow the sun, he felt the first tilt. The horizon didn't just bend, it inverted. He realized that the world he knew was just the skin of a much deeper reality, one that white speak could never describe. He discovered the first current, the way of the animal. It was a language of muscle and scent, of the hair rising on the back of the neck before a storm. Ren stopped thinking in nouns and started feeling in verbs. He tracked the invisible trails of heat left by the whales and the salt-crusted memory of the wind. Then came the way of the spirit. This was the realization of lingering presence, that the dead did not leave, they simply became the atmosphere. Ren felt the breath of ancestors in the humidity of the air. He saw that every space was occupied by the echoes of those who had come before, their laughter still vibrating in the molecules of the wood and stone. Finally, he understood the way of the human. He saw that true language was nonverbal, a hum of intent that passed between people like a magnetic field. Words were just the decoys we used to distract ourselves from the terrifying intimacy of being known. In the silence of the inverted coast, he could finally hear the truth. Then the inverted broadcast began. Ren realized his thoughts were no longer private. They radiated outward like ripples in a pond. Neighbors and strangers didn't need his white speak to know his sorrow or his joy. His mind was an open book, and the world was reading along, responding not with judgment, but with a quiet, collective understanding. He looked up at the power lines that crisscrossed the streets of the new land. They were no longer just wires for electricity. Sitting upon them were quiet angels, pale, bird-like figures with elongated limbs and watchful eyes. They were the technicians of the broadcast, listening to the silent symphony of human thought and weaving it into the fabric of the sky. Ren returned to Kaylin, no longer a citizen of the grid, but a late graduate of the world's silent school. He didn't need to explain his journey with clinical words. He simply took her hand, and through the touch she saw the currents, the spirits, and the angels. Together they stood on the inverted coast, where the lines were soft and the heart was the only map.